Dobrý večer, já vás tady moc vítám. Is there anybody who doesn't speak Czech?
Me.
And otherwise, I will take the Já vás tady vítám jménem Klimatické koalice, což je platforma, neformální platforma neziskových organizací, které se zabývají ochranou přírody, ochranou klimatu a také rozvojovou pomocí. Takže vlastně propojuje taková originálním způsobem propojuje různá témata. A proto jsme vlastně uspořádali tuto přednášku na téma vodní stopy, která podle nás propojuje vlastně pomoc v rozvojovém světě i téma ochrany přírody. Ještě bych chtěla říct, že tady vepředu máme prezentaci, která slouží, kromě toho, abychom měli přehled, kolik tady vlastně bylo k tomu, že když nám necháte e-mail, tak já vám potom pošlu prezentaci a nějaké další materiály vlastně na ten e-mail, takže buď teď nebo při odchodu se vám můžete zapsat. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Ertug Ercin from Udržitelného Network, who will say the lecture, and at the very beginning we will start with Mr. from Water Research Institute, who will say a short presentation on current Czech research on water footprint. So if we can start from now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday I was asked for a few words about water footprinting in the Czech Republic. In the first, I have to say that we have one term, water footprint, but we have two different methodologies for water footprinting. Mr. Ercin will speak about the volumetric, so-called volumetric water footprint, which is focused on the total volume of water used in the supply chain or life cycle of product, process or institution. And the second approach is based on life cycle assessment and is focused on the impact of water use in the supply chain, respectively in the life cycle, any product, organization or process. These two different methodologies are very similar, but these two tools are for different audiences. Volumetric water footprint was established as tool for water managers, and it's focused on the volume. The life cycle assessment water footprinting is based on LCA methodology and is prepared for environmental managers. And this means that the calculation of water footprint in both methodologies are totally different. But both methodologies are crucially dependent on the input data about water use. And I think this is the main problems of all these methodologies, because the quality of these data are very different on each level of complexity or detail of scale and temporary resolution. That was a very short brief about water footprint and what situation is in the Czech Republic. On our institute, we finished this year 3 years project focused on the life cycle assessment water footprinting, because in 2014 was published international standard ISO 14046, and our project is focused on the answer on question, how should be this standard implemented in practice. In this project, we also prepare 5 pilot studies, and I think only, I don't know any other studies based on LCA focused on water footprinting. In the volumetric water footprint, which is standard little bit older, you can find some studies in the Czech Republic. The common known is a study from Miller, which compare bravery in the South Africa with Plzeňský Pastroj. You can also find, today morning I found 3 diploma theses from Czech universities which compute water footprint of any products in the Czech Republic, and about 3 another diploma thesis which mentioned water footprint in different contexts but don't calculate value of water footprint. I know that the Veolia has your own approach for water footprinting, and some other companies also thinking about water footprinting, but I don't know any study which calculate water footprint in the Czech Republic, but a lot of companies use water accounting or implement water accounting in your business, because these data are very important and are background for calculation of water footprint. Unfortunately, it's not a problem to collect data from my company if I am, for example, environmental manager responsible for water footprinting. But the problem is collect data from another segment of supply chain. Relatively easy, I can collect data from first segment in supply chain from my company, but all other segments are problematic. In this case, you have used so-called secondary data, and this is a little bit problem. These data are not very often available, and these data are very often based on statistical. So if you use any water footprint calculator, that in the reality you do not calculate your water footprint, but water footprint of any idealized statistical unit with your stereotypes. It leads to, and it's my point of view, that the water footprint is only analytical tool which can relatively good answer on question is A better as B or not, but the answer on question how much is my water footprint or similar question is not so precise or accurate, because the variability of information of what you use in each segment of supply chain are really big. So, from my point of view, water footprint can very easily answer on question how much if my supply chain is very short, or if I calculate water footprint for some big unit in the best way for statistical unit as countries or nations, and all other levels between are not so accurate. And I hope that Mr. Ercin showed us that my point of view is not correct and the situation is better as I think. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you. I don't think I can answer your question. You will judge after the end of the presentation. First of all, this is a pleasure to have a presentation lecture in this room. It's amazing. Just I always give lectures in many places in the world, but this is particularly striking me, and then I'm very happy that we're here and then invited by Radka and her colleagues. It's a privilege to be in Prague, I'm in Czech Republic, but also privilege to be in this room in Czech Science Academy. First, before starting my presentation, I don't know people's technical backgrounds, their English levels. I try to speak slowly, least technical as possible, but sometimes I can't avoid. So just raise your hand, say, I don't understand you. It's perfectly fine, just say it, whether the language or whether the technical, or I speak sometimes too fast. And if you have any questions, please ask the moment that you have. There's a question, there's nothing called a stupid question. Questions always give some answers. People, when I lecture particularly on PhD level or master students, they always hesitate to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid in front of a class. There is nothing else like that. This is a topic you may not know fully, so please raise your hand. And if you find something not logical, say that, oh, this doesn't make sense, just say it. I'm very open to discussions and then new ideas and new things. So, and let's be interactive as much as possible. Because I have a potential to talk hours and hours, so just stop me and then participate in the lecture. So this is not a lecture, this is let's say, a talk between us. First of all, introduce myself. I'm Ertug Ercin. I'm originally Turkish, living in the Netherlands. The reason I'm in the Netherlands is actually the story behind the water footprint. I'm originally studied, I'm a water scientist, but I studied hydromechanical engineering. I was designing dams, water structures, water supply systems, flood protection systems, and everything. You know, those kind of engineers who does sit on the computer, designs everything, build the concrete, spend the money. Then one day I was reading a lot, and then I said, look, where is the end of it? Where is the end of building structures? Where is the end of supplying things to the people? People demand more and more. You ask more, people demand more and more. So there has to be a limit. The limit, of course, was very obvious for me, the earth. I mean, there is a limit that we can supply to people. So, supplying engineering, which I call it hard engineering, is always a limitation in its own, because there's always a limit in the supply. So you have to look at the demand side of the things. If you want to manage resources which are not renewable, yes, water is renewable, but we will come to that point why it is not in a local sense. And I said, okay, but people have to use less, use it more efficiently, or don't waste food, don't waste the resource that you're using. So when I understood that, I started doing engineering called soft engineering. I'm calling it soft engineering because I don't do design anything, but I work on the more policy and management side of the things, because there's enough water in the world. There is enough water in the world as long as we know how to manage wisely from both supply side and demand side. So this is about water footprint. Water footprint is building the bridge between the demand and the supply. It does it in three many ways. So, sorry, I forgot your name. Sorry? Ibor. And what he said is just like, there are two methodologies. I will present a storyline from looking from a water resources management perspective. His perspective, or LC's perspective, is more product bottom-up perspective. I'm looking from how to manage the resources and how water footprint assessment reflects to that. These are two different approaches at the end, in the middle of the product level, almost the same, but I'm looking from a more top-down approach, looking from the resource management, and he's looking from a product design or product comparison LCA type of studies. So I don't know if I can answer your questions, but we will see some examples I have for the product. So when I decided that I have to do some soft engineering, I met a professor from the Netherlands called Professor Hoekstra. And then I wrote to him one day, I want to come and visit you. He said, come. Then a couple of months later, he offered me a PhD grant, and then I did my PhD with him. Then I started my journey, and it's been, I think, 7 years that I've been working with 10 years, sorry. I'm working with the network, and I'm working with the Professor Hoekstra about water footprint assessment. So how the storyline starts, let me get this. So it's all about understanding the problems in the world and linking to the final consumption. What this means is that this is Aral Sea. I'm sure you heard of it. Aral Sea is in Central Asia. Central Asia has lots of problems, and the Aral Sea in Central Asia is about north part of it, Uzbekistan, a bit Kazakhstan, part of it. There's no water anymore. So what? So it's not relevant to it. It's so far away. You know, 68% of cotton and cotton products that you're wearing now in Czech Republic is coming from this area. 68. I checked it this morning before I came into the presentation. 68% of it. So approximately how many people are here? Like 50? Like I didn't calculate. And this 50, just approximately 70% of the 50 is 35 people are responsible for this. Aral Sea water depletion. Just a simple mathematics. So there is a link between your consumption and between the water problems all around the world. So we can't ignore this fact. The whole philosophy of water footprint, we can also talk about mutual water flows. These are the same two things. I will come to the explanations. Are related to understanding the patterns of consumption, of human consumption, or production, and the problems environmental in the world. So what if there's no water here at all? You can see that there is no, I have to show like this, I think. You can see that animals, the dolphins died there, just because of that. There is a big biodiversity loss. The people who are fishing, the communities badly impacted. Because Aral Sea is a closed basin, and then drained only by only 2 rivers. And then this is happening because of the cotton of the Soviet Socialist Republic, about their strategy about building those areas as a cotton, which is not actually good for cotton, except the climate. So, and you can see the changes here. This is 1989, this is 2008. The lake is not there anymore. Now there are projects that people are trying to do, trying to get the water back, but still, it's a big problem. Same. I don't know if you produce any strawberries, but I'm sure you find strawberries in the supermarket. In Europe, most of them are coming from Spain. Very simple. Why? Climate is favorable, it's very lucrative to produce this. It's a cash crop, easy to grow in Spain. What happens in Doñana National Park? Doñana National Park is a very important national park for Europe and for Spain. This happens. Water is not there anymore. Livelihoods are affected. Nature has affected. So this is related to strawberries we eat in the supermarkets here. Same for me in the Netherlands. So this is about the whole philosophy where the water footprint lies from the water resources management perspective. This is an interesting story I want to tell you. I live in the Netherlands, but I came to the Netherlands, have you been to Amsterdam before? Anyone? Yeah. Good. Amsterdam there's a called flower market, which is on the street floating market where they sell bulbs. And then this is Dutch, really Dutch thing, just if you think about the Netherlands, you think about these flowers. Where are they produced? Lake Narasha in Kenya, not in the Netherlands. So if you bought this 100 bulbs for €5 thing in the market, it's coming from here. So actually, the production is happening there. Production happening in this lake, and there are lots of pollution problems and water scarcity problems. And of course, Dutch government knows it, understood it. When you show this to the Dutch government, because this is relevant to their economy. They have a huge businesses related to flowers. What do? They try to solve the water problems there. So all the things in our world are interconnected in that sense. Pollution, the same. Minerals. Where is this? Hungary. And then there's a flood of pollution. Why? Because of this mineral used for other purposes in industry. Pollution related to agriculture. This is huge. This is the most underestimated pollution problem in the world, because it goes directly into the underground water, nitrates, phosphorus, whatever you're using, because of fertilizers, because of other chemicals used. And this is significant because actually nobody realizes that, but pollution is a water use at the same time. There's no difference. You either use water, consume water, or you pollute water. What is the difference? Because if you pollute the water, I'm not talking about the environmental impacts, no one can use it again unless you invest some money to treat it. So water pollution is kind of a water consumption. Because everyone, look at when you talk about the water managers or different water and the authorities like municipalities, they always divide into sections. Wastewater treatment, water supply. They never look at the combined effects. This is not fully correct because if you pollute, you cannot use, you cannot use before treatment, or the downstream user cannot use as much as you can do. So treatment and also pollution. I will show you an example from London, which is very interesting. And this pollution from agriculture is really large. For where? For the places like Indus River, for the places like Ganges River, or for the river, for Mississippi River, for Colorado River. There's a big rivers which are the agricultural baskets of the world. I don't know which rivers exactly, because Czech Republic is good for, famous for its known as agricultural production, but I don't know which kind of problems they occur with the. It's difficult to find information about this unless you speak Czech, I think. The second thing, this is where the LCA part of the water footprint philosophy comes. For everything we consume and we produce, you need water. You cannot produce anything without water. Worst case scenario, if human is involved, they use water for sanitary purposes or drinking purposes. So every production has water consumption embedded in it. Embedded in means that you don't see that water. There is water used. You don't see it. If you see this bottle, just a bottle, don't think about water in it. This is just water, plastic water. To produce that water, approximately, how much is this? This is 1 liter, I assume. 1.5 liter. Approximately, for 1.5 liter of PET bottle, you need to consume 7 to 10 liters of water to produce the bottle. That's we call embedded water. You don't see it, but that's the amount of water is consumed. I have to give a quick remark on that. Water use and water consumption are two different things. People use in these days water use, water consumption, water use, water consumption. They are different. Water use means that you use it and give it back, which means that you don't consume it. It's still there. You can alter its physical characteristic in terms of pollutants given, but it is still physically amount is there. From water resources management perspective, from the river basin, water consumption makes sense because the water is still there, still can be usable. But from other purposes, for example, withdrawals can also make a good indicator. When we talk about water footprint is about water consumption and water pollution at the same time, but mainly water consumption. So this water is consumed. Consumed water means it's either evaporated or evapotranspirated. So there are, if it is an agricultural thing, it can evapotranspirate by the plant, goes to the atmosphere, or it can go to embedded in the product. You see there's product water in it. It's taken from somewhere and put it inside here. We don't know where. I don't know. From some mountain springs or somewhere else. So this is about the difference between consumption and the production. Oh, 2 people left already. Am I too boring? Okay. So what is the problem? Water is renewable. So what is the problem of using the water or consuming the water? Simple as this. You consume it, it evaporates, you don't know where it goes. Probably it will fall as a rainfall somewhere on the ocean. At the consumption, you use that here, and that is not available here, and more than 95-97% of the chance it will not come back to here. So water, when we talk about water, local issues are very interesting and very important to understand, because scarcity, pollution, drought, flood only happens locally. But between the trade of the commodities and the things, then it becomes more international, globally connected. I show you that, because we consume water intensive products somewhere else. Here, that's produced somewhere else. So let me give some examples to you. Coffee. Just 1 cup of coffee to produce 1 cup of coffee, on global average, these numbers I'm saying, is 140 liters of water is necessary. What is this water coming from? Coffee cultivated on the farm. You take it, you process it, you trade it, you process it again, and then you include it in your instant coffee in your cup. So everything for this, you need 140 liters. This is an average value. I can answer this question. When you do a global study, or when you do a very broad elaboration, then these numbers have 10 to 15% error can possible. But there are ways, if you look for a very specific product, like coffee grown in this coordinate of Brazil, then your really margin of error is very low. You can have a very, very specific numbers, less than 5% of error margin. It's up to what's your concern. This is for awareness raising, nothing more than that, because it can be somewhere in our, if you get the coffee from Colombia, maybe it's 160 liters, I don't know. This is average globally. On average, a hamburger needs 2,400 liters of water to produce. Where is this coming from? The meat. Meat is the biggest water consumer in the world because of the animal feed. Nothing more than that. What animal eats? Soybean. So when you look at this is very similar to, this is exactly the same of LCA approach. You look at through all the life cycle of a product. What is the life cycle of this? Starting from the feed, animal water, then you slaughter it, then you cut it, then you just be on the market, package it, put the bread on it, put the onion, put the other things, cheese and everything. So it becomes approximately on global average 2,400. In some countries like Spain, it gets more than 10,000. In countries like Czech Republic, it is less. I can tell you that. A t-shirt, 2,700 liters. Same, cotton, and the wet processing means they're dyeing the fabric and everything, so it includes 2,700. Sugar, 1 kilogram of sugar, 1,500 liters. Tomato, 180 liters. Glass of wine, 120 liters. I can continue all day. And beer, I think because I added just today because I know that in Czech beer is such a national drink. And this is on average, global average, 74 liters. So it is not that high. But I will come to that means green, blue, and gray, the next slide, what it means. Because in water footprint has its different components. So water footprint means this: amount of water that is embedded or used, or consumed and polluted to produce a product. That's the product water footprint. From a consumer footprint part, water footprint of a consumer is the amount for our consumption activities, daily, monthly, or annually, the amount of things we buy, consume, or waste, the amount of water that is necessary to produce that items that we are consuming. Of a nation, the same concept. The whole nation, 50 million people lives, then 50 million amount of commodities they consume, use, and amount of water that is necessary to produce those commodities. It's very simple for it. Or a river basin. You can define for a river basin. But from a river basin perspective, water footprint concept is more about water footprint of production. So how much amount of water that is used for human purposes. Are you familiar with footprint concept? Anyone? Yeah. I mean, footprint means simple. It's about human. If there's no human interference or use, there is no footprint. What I mean is that footprint is, in English, is a term, but for example, in my language, there's no such term occurs, so it looks weird for me. So if you walk on the sand, if a person walks on the sand, you leave a mark. That's your footprint. If you walk on the environment, if you use the environment of the resources of the environment, then you leave a mark on it, an impact of it, or a pressure on it, which is called the footprint. There are a couple of footprints: ecological footprint, carbon footprint, material footprint, nitrogen footprint, phosphorus footprint. There are lots of, and the water footprint. The most famous are the ecological water and carbon footprints, of course. So it's all about human consumption. So if there is no human use of any activity, there is no water footprint. So we need to understand this so that we can continue. Any questions? Or is it clear? My English is okay, not too quick. My technical use is okay, right? Or too simple? Please.
Question concerning the product footprint is transportation inside of amount of water or transport?
You can include transportation, but transportation has a very low water footprint. If you use oil, I mean like the fuel, but if you use biofuel, then it's too high. Then you have to include. It's all about the scope of your frame of analysis. So you look at the items because some people can ask, so in a product, where can I go? For example, in agriculture, can I go to the fertilizer production of the agricultural phase? We did a study which was very detailed. We used all LCA databases. But we saw that some items like transportation, unless it is biofuel use, it is so minor, less than 1%, even 1/1000. So the amount of water footprint is so low, you can ignore, because at the end, your error margin is approximately 5 to 10%. To make that analysis, this is the answer of question. Yes, you cannot be perfect because some materials and some in supply chain use, you cannot find how much water is used. Impossible. Look at the LCA databases like CIMAPRO or those kind of databases. They are based on mostly, they go to a couple of factories somewhere in Switzerland, in Europe, and they think that's the water use. Industrial water use is almost difficult to understand because the methodological, technological processes are so different globally. It's up to the machine you're using. If you're using that kind of a machine built in China, water use is different. If the same machine built in the US, the water use is different. You cannot find this. And then, so what we do the truncation analysis so that what is it significant? In water, over 90% of the water consumption in the world is related to agriculture. Or the food we eat, food processing, food and beverages. The rest is like half industrial, half domestic use. So if from a water resources perspective, if you want to solve the water issues of the problems of the world, you work with the farmers. You work to increase the agricultural productivity. That's why I will show you the most examples from agricultural-based products. And the second is that mostly this agricultural phase, there are 2-3 elements. The first element is the rainfall. The second is the water use. A crop needs a certain amount of water to produce. Either is it coming from rainfall directly, or is it coming from the irrigation? So that's between green and blue. I will come to that part. So it is, for water, if you have in your product food or agricultural based origin something raw material, you have to look at its water footprint. That is the key. That will come approximately 60 to 80% of its water footprint, definitely. And then in the world, there are 6 major crops who create the problems of water in the world. Cotton, sunflowers. What else? Let's hear from you. I mean, I'm just looking. Which crops do you think is the thirstiest crops in the world? Which creates the water problems? Rice. What else? Yes, some locations you can say that they create problems. Sorry? Yes, but almonds are produced very small amount. Maybe in California that's the biggest problem, that's true. But not in Spain, for example. Spain, it grows without any water, it just grows on the tree naturally. So you don't do anything. So it's a local problem in almonds. But globally, I'm talking about the whole globe, big issues. Corn, yes. Rice, corn, cotton, sugar cane, not sugar beet. In Europe, we are lucky that we're using sugar beet because it's very locally grown. It doesn't need lots of water, not just rainfall falls and then it grows. But in many parts of the world, except Europe almost, source of sugar is sugar cane. South America, North America, Southeast Asia. These are big consumers and producers. And sugar cane is one of the most thirstiest crop in the world. It's a big problem. So, for example, if you look at the Ganges River is one of the biggest rivers in the world. What's the problem there? Rice, cotton, and sugarcane. In Europe, if you look at the problems in Spain, it's vegetables and fruits. If you look at France, it is sunflower. Sunflower is a big source industrial product because it has a value in it in terms of oil. So there are 5-6 crops in the world that makes crop the problems. The reason is these crops need lots of water, and they grow in semi-arid areas most probably, and also in a hot climate. So the worst case scenario, you don't have water, it has to be hot, and it has to be in a semi-arid region. So this is again another LC type of it. So we said that the product is not just its agricultural input. For example, from a Starbucks, we did like a cup of coffee from Starbucks on average globally needs 208 liters of water, and then approximately 143 liters of it is coming from agricultural input, which is coffee. The rest is, you can see that, like the cap is 2.4 liters, not the glass, but whatever you put in it, 5.7 liters. Even the ink it's used, including the print on it, all of them need to produce water needed. So water footprint, we understand it. Water footprint brings, so what is new about it? What is the hype about it? Why people are not saying water use, water consumption, why do we need a new term? There are lots of new terms in the world. First of all, it looks at from the whole supply chain. So when we talk about a water footprint, you look from the farm to the end product, end user. So it has a full supply chain concept. This is why this is important. When this is approximately, I think, 2002, Professor Hoekstra started saying water footprint concept and giving information about water footprint. Water footprint network is established in 2008, and then in those years when I started working with Professor Hoekstra, 2007, and the companies are still doing it. The big companies, I work with all of them, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Heineken, and everyone. They look at the factory. When they say that, what did you do about water performance? They say, at my factory, my per bottle of, I don't know, Coca-Cola I produced, it was 1.5 liters. Now I'm using 1.45 liters. Yes, it's in your factory. And this is their key indicator, key performance indicator. Yes, this is relevant. In their factory, it's amazing. They saved 0.05 liters within 5 years and investing millions of dollars in it, whatever. What about the key ingredients? What about the sugar you're using? So, water footprint concept brought this supply chain thinking in water. The supply chain thinking was before in many, they have supply chain departments, but not on water. They never thought about it. They always thought about their water indicator is their factory indicator, not their whole supply chain water. Because when you talk about Coca-Cola, it's all about vanilla they use, and then they also do, because they put vanilla inside Coca-Cola somehow, and then also the sugar they put. I don't know the formula. When I work with them, I ask them, they just said, no, we don't give you the formula. We just say, there are ingredients you don't need to deal with. Because it's interesting, when I start working with them, I said to them, I need a formula, otherwise how can I calculate your water footprint? And they said, they say have an XXX ingredient, which I don't know. It's interesting to talk with them. And the second is that it is geographically and temporally explicit. What does it mean? What do you understand from this? Water is, we always talk about one dimension of water, which is the volume. Actually, water has 3 dimensions: volume, space, and time. Because water use, water consumption, water availability, water scarcity, water pollution change spatially and temporally. Change per time, daily, change per location, from Czech Republic to Poland, even from Prague to other city. So all the conditions are different. So it has 3 dimensions. So when we talk about water footprint, We just don't say the volume. We just say when and where. So we make it a three-dimensional. I will show you this one. This is a PhD student, and then I was involved when I was a PhD to study. So this is the water availability in the world. So you can see that this is January now. Sorry, I need my glasses. This is June, sorry. The June, the blue, darker the blue, means there is more water. So this is now August. This goes to September, October, November, and December. As you can see, availability changes per month. You can do daily. I have the daily results, but I can't show you daily anyways. So, and it changes per location. These are the major river basins in the world. We have the information of 1.1 kilometer scale also, but that's too much to show. But this is on the major river basins in the world. So this is the water availability. It's all about how much water falls, rainfall falls, and how much water is running in the rivers. And this is the water use. It's the same months. The darker the blue on the left one means that water use is more. It's never the same. When it's low, when it's just high. So you can see that you need to understand when it's water used and where it is used. This is all about the impacts at the end. So if you divide water use, water availability by water use, you come with an indicator called water scarcity. So this is a change of the water scarcity. Green means water scarcity is low. Yellow to red means water scarcity is high. So you can see that per month it changes wherever in the world per month. So when you say that I use water, I will ask you when, from where. So this is one of the innovative ideas or the new elements that water footprint assessment brings to the water resources management. So you have to look at, now people are looking at from daily perspective, from a 1 kilometer scale. The second thing, the third thing, the first one is, I said, supply chain perspective. The second one is time and also the space. The third one is about pollution. I briefly described to you, water pollution is always taken as a separate issue. But at the same time, when you pollute water, you consume some water. It's simply because when you give some pollutants, there is some amount of water that is needed to make it as a naturally harmless water. So when the pollution starts in a river, I don't know, are there any chemical engineers or chemists or environmental engineers here? No. Okay. This is a bit difficult item, but for example, I'll give you an example. So this is a glass of water you can drink. It's drinkable water. There is a certain amount of salt I can add to it. You can still drink, but there is a limit. If I add more than that limit, you cannot drink it because it's too salty, not drinkable anymore, not usable anymore. So this is the amount of, that is called environmental capacity. For each pollutant there is a capacity which is called allowable limits of the environment. So that's why the discharge characteristics are calculated in that way. This is getting too technical maybe, but so actually if I put this salt, I use this amount of water. If I increase the salt, I use this amount of water. If I increase the salt, I use the whole water. Simple as it is. I drink this water. I wash it with my hands. Will you drink this? No. Not usable anymore, right? So it's part of its consumed, it's gone. If I wash my hands with this water, none of you will drink it. You need another type of water. You need it from the bottle. That's what it means. Pollution also means some kind of a consumption. None of us in this room can drink this anymore. So this is the fourth thing that's about bringing the water footprint concept into the water resources management. So again, the water pollution is coming to this way. We look at the water pollution also changes per time and per space. So you can see this doesn't move because that's That's really hard to do. And then you can see that this is just nitrogen and phosphorus related to agriculture, nothing more than that. There is no industrial in it. It's the pollution levels. So you can see that if you go from green, yellow to red, the pollution levels increase. When it is 1, it is light yellow, I think. 1 means there is no pollution. No pollution means that like eutrophication hasn't started yet. No biodiversity problems happening because of pollution. And then just if it is more than 5, 10, it becomes really, you can feel, see, observe the pollution. Let me check the time, by the way. Okay. So you can do for all polluters in the world about this kind of studies. So why this is important? So this is bringing it. When you look at holistically this approach, I think it was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, London Thames River, in the London Thames just flows through London. The upper part of the Thames River basin just came to us and said, I have a problem. What's your problem? They said, we have regulations, they're great, very strict, we control it, we measure it, we observe it, we do everything. We don't give people permits, pollution permits and everything, but there is still pollution and we can't find why. Why? Why do you think there is still pollution? I mean, they check everything, all industries are just giving on the discharge requirements, everything's perfect clear, everyone is obeying the rules, the discharge water is perfectly clean almost, but in some periods of the year, particularly in summer periods, I get up here, and then the water is becoming polluted and problematic. Why? The reason is simple. In summer periods, they use more water. So there is less water in the water. So although you give it the same amount of pollutants in the river, the pollution starts. The concentrations become so high, it becomes impactful and harmful. So everyone talks about climate change, reduction of droughts and everything. The drought and the reduction in the water in the river basins will increase pollution in the rivers. It will start, environment will be started impacted by the river because simply there is less water, there is less capacity water to assimilate the pollutants given to the environment. This has to be seen as a collectively. So that's why it's so important. Of course, we did an assessment. I will show you some maps. I think it's the end of the presentation, but it's then we understood with London, the environmental agency of the Thames River, as that their current water pollution permissions and water use permissions are not adequate. We joined them and we suggested, say that you have to do it this way. Then you have to give the permissions of water use and the pollution permitting, because you permit pollutions, you let them discharge certain amount of pollutants. You limit those, looking at by both sides. If there is enough water to assimilate, or is there enough pollutant? Is there more pollutant than it is required to be in the river? Also, another problem was there is, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but a river, that there's a permission, industrial standards for giving particular pollutants, chemicals into the river. So if you're, for example, paper industry, you look at the grays or just like this BOD, COD type of things. There's always maximum allowable limits. Those are for industries designed as a probabilistic approach, saying that there is a number of industries, intensity is mild or medium, not on the high intensity. That's why when you go to the industrial zones, although they are obligingly changed, there are pollution problems can be observed because the intensity of the pollutant discharge is so high that the accumulative impact of those chemicals become impactful to the environment. So another element that water footprint assessment brings is pollution. And when you look at the pollution, forget about the discharge requirements or concentrations. give the amount of pollutant load you're giving to the environment. And use ambient water quality standards rather than discharge water quality standards. The difference is discharge quality standard is based on some average statistical analysis saying that you can discharge it because in this area there may be 20 or 30 industrial establishments that may discharge the same and this is enough. But when you build 50 of them, there's a problem. And of course, you're discharging to the river. So you have to look at this capacity of the river in terms of environmental capacity of the river. So ambient water quality standard means the standards of the river from the environmental perspective. Like, I'm sure you know the water directive. And it says good status, bad status. Those are based on environmental side perspective, which is ambient water quality standards. Why many countries in Europe cannot fulfill it? Because they allow industries to discharge based on the discharge limits, but the directive says you have to look at from the environmental perspective. So, and they don't match. Totally they don't match. Okay. Any questions? Fine? Yes, please. Maybe I give you this so that everyone hears it. Maybe I use
I'm
that.
just wondering what is the split between the pollution of home users and companies. If you can just maybe
And
companies, the companies that produce some products, industry.
And the home?
Home users, like people who live in home users and industry.
Industry. So the question is, what is the relation?
Now, what is the pollution split? I mean, how many percentages?
The biggest polluter in the world is first industry, of course, and particularly in developing part of the world. Here we don't have problems because what we do, we buy from Chinese products and China is polluted. That's enough. The second one is of course, agriculture is a big problem. The third one is home, because particularly if you talk about Europe, we have a good treatment percentages. So the home production is home domestic wastewater is not a big problem. But we don't know one thing. This is also related to water footprint. We consume lots of interesting products, pharmaceutical products. That gives lots of problems, pollution problems to the environment. This is very dangerous. I was in Stockholm last month about World Water Week, and I give a speech in a session called Water Pollution Related to Pharmaceutical Use. It's huge. It's untreatable. None of the treatment plants just built in Europe, in the world, can treat this, because no one knows how much it is. Antibiotic use. There's a huge problem. And also the meat, today intensified meat production uses lots of antibiotics for the animals. This is again supply chain. The farmer gives the antibiotic to the cow, and we eat the cow, we take it our body, that antibiotic, and we discharge into the wastewater, and that goes to the river. So it goes there, there's a cycle. It goes there. And this is not known, not treatable, because nobody thought about it, and it's a big problem. There are lots of chemicals like this that we don't know and creating lots of problems to the environment, which are not explained. I'll give you an example also. In the Netherlands, it's a great country in terms of environmental protection itself, and there are lots of water. The biggest problem is water pollution. They cannot find the source. At the end, they found that it's the meat production. There are lots of cows there. We eat lots of cheese, and that's the problem. Hidden, unknown, unseen problems. So in some certain cases, human wastewater can create lots of environmental problems. But industry is the biggest one, of course. The reason is industry here is not a big problem, but our production industrial production is not happening here. I'm buying iPhone, 90% is produced in China. All these tiny, tiny elements. So what happens? Go to Yellow River. Go to other rivers in China. They're so polluted. We externalize our pollution actually. Our industry is clean, the same for energy, that's the difference. We externalize our carbon footprint. We externalize our water footprint. We externalize our ecological footprint. All of the same, because we let the others dirt on behalf of our consumption. So this is the link, I'm coming to the first point of linking the consumption and the production elsewhere in the world. So we need to understand this, because I always say to the people, look, everyone in this room, everyone, including myself, we have a responsibility. I'm wearing black. Black wearing t-shirt is the worst thing you can do for an environment. In Bangladesh, I went to Bangladesh. I visited all these factories producing this. I hope this is not from Bangladesh, I have to check it. I see the people is washing themselves, bathing in a river that is this color because they produce this material, their fabric, without any treatment. And we buy it here. It's so cheap. 10 euros, 5 euros, 2 euros, even there are shops that's 1 euro. 1 euro shop, go and buy. Where is it produced? God knows. The river, I met a guy, a boy, and I asked him, he was working, his mother is working for the factory. The river is black, seriously black. And then it was a dry season, and it was completely, and it's very sticky. You just get a water, it's like, you should go and see those places. I mean, we're living in a heaven, I have to tell you. And then and then he's washing his clothes there, and he jumped in the water, and then I said, what are you doing? And then he came out, and he showed me all his body. It was full of this kind of pimples and those kind of things. I was scared, I was like, what is this? Why are you going into that water? He said, he doesn't have any choice. And I told him, you know that factory, I don't want to tell the brand names, but that factory, I saw 2 shops of the brand just when I'm walking down, just buying from that factory. And then that factory discharges water, wastewater there without any treatment. And at the end, that boy goes into the water because he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have another water. I asked him, why don't you complain? He said, no, my mother works for that factory. It's a very dilemma. It's because for him, it's a resource water, highly polluted. He gets diseases, but at the same time, it's the source of food. So to see this kind of information understands that. So whenever I buy something, I bought this and I checked where this is coming from, and I was almost sure that it's coming from a more sustainable location. There's lots of things, responsibilities to us. We need to question things. We need this coming from. That's why water footprint type of indicators are important, because it tells you from where, how, what is the impact, and is it sustainable or not. That's we need to understand. So water footprint is great in awareness raising in that terms. This more technical side of it. Water footprint has 3 components: green, blue, and gray. Why? Because the green and blue, it's about water consumption. Gray is logically saying is about water pollution. I don't want to go into the definitions. I will skip a couple of slides. Green is rainwater, simply. Rainwater, why rainwater is important? Rainwater is the main source of many agricultural products in the world. And it is relevant to droughts. It's relevant to water scarcity also at the same time. Blue, river water, groundwater, the water we see, and the gray is green. So, I'm just skipping these definitions and then technical equations, because that might be, if you're interested, we can talk about it, but is there an interest in these technical definitions or equations? If I'm an engineer, if I sit there and say, oh, I want to check the equation, but not everyone is an engineer. Anyways, if you're interested, we can talk about it. So, the question starts this is where I'm coming to, is a more concrete. So what? I use this water. So what? I pollute. I have lots of water. And I mean, for example, in the Netherlands, Rhine River is one of the biggest rivers in Europe. There's enough water in Rhine. So what if I use this water And then what's the problem? There's enough water. So, water footprints, when you look at, when I say a product perspective, when I say it's 100 liters of water, you can easily argue with me, so what? There's enough water there. So what if I use that water? So, this is where we get the difference between LCA, water footprint, and the approach that we're using. They're using coefficients to multiply with the different impacts. We look at from more geographic perspective, we source the origins and timing and look at the problems there. Is it sustainability in terms of, is it from a water scarce area? Is it efficiently used? Is it below the benchmarks, above the benchmarks? Is there anything that can produce? So we look at more analytics in terms of a detailed where, how, and where, and we've tried to find a solution how to reduce it or how to make it more sustainable. And this is what we call water footprint assessment. Yes, water footprint, as we say, is in volumes, but we have to carry in the next phase to understand if it is impactful or not, and what kind of solutions can you do. The difference between LCA. LCA is comparing two products. That is the aim for LS. Please correct me, I'm not an expert. But it's more about if you produce this glass here or this glass here, what is the impact to the environment? It's fully designed to understand, not from water perspective, they have lots of indicators embedded, and they try to get only one number, ultimately, so that this product has 1, this product has 3, whatever, and want to compare where the production should go, or is it, but it doesn't say anything. So, for example, if I say this is, they're using equivalents, water equivalents, right? And then they say, for example, this is 3 water equivalent water footprint, this is 4. What is not said there is that, and which component of it is the number? Where? That's an impact number. This is 3, 4. Yes, this is more impactful, but where? Yes, you can dig into, but ultimately the two approaches have different users. This is for product designers or for a company person who wants to understand if he produces there or uses that material, where. When I look at the volumetric and looking at this from perspective, I look from the forwards to understand the sources of the problem, where, when, and how, and trying to find a solution. So there are two different approaches there. Both of them correct. It's up to whoever the user or what's your purpose about. If your purpose is to compare your products or having a more aggregated one impactful number in a category, that's fine. That's just LCA is the best. LCA water footprint. So for me, it's the philosophy is important. Both has the philosophy of the supply chain perspective. This is the biggest innovative approach in both. So for me, there's not a big difference. It's only up to which end user you are from. But if I'm a user, for example, if I'm supplying cotton around the world, if I'm CNA, I did a project with CNA, I will talk. And if I want to understand where the cotton is risky production and what I can do about it, then I wouldn't use LCA. But if I say that my production factory, if I do it in Bangladesh or in Turkey or in Poland, then I may use LCA. It has different perspectives to make the decisions. But if I try to understand my risks, my dependencies, and what can I do about it, then this approach makes more sense because it's more informative. It gives you the more understandable mapping things in your face. So, which is from the water resources perspective. The other one is bottom up, more product perspective. So they promote the same things. People say that this is different, there are too many. No, this is one philosophy embedded in it. Looking from the product, supply chain perspective. I'm a water resources management and policy person, I'm looking from a more this kind of an approach rather than more on the impact categories, because impact can change, because I showed you water scarcity changes per month, per location. And then for me, it's difficult to understand if I get a coefficient there, but the coefficient changes next day. So if actually I'm comparing the right numbers is a question. It has a different value and understanding. But of course, at the same time, from my side, I just look at the water issues. I don't see the trades-off with different environmental impacts. And that's where powerful as LCA is about. Actually, I use lots of LCA databases. I publish lots of things with Unilever about LCA and everything. Let's continue. So you need this kind of an assessment. You need to understand that water is efficient and sustainable in terms of a hotspot. How can it be used? I'll give you more examples. Do we have time, by the way? 10 minutes, wow. Okay, this is awareness raising. Now all of you have aware of your responsibilities about what's happening in the world, as a consumer. You have more awareness now. It's a very good concept to give awareness. This is for sure. So, it is used to make different assessments on country level, or for example, this is carbon and water footprint assessments of different businesses. This is about CNA. Within the network, when I was working with network, I worked with different companies, all of the international companies you can imagine, Unilever, Heineken, Coca-Cola, and everything. Because it's recent standard, the water footprint LCA, these companies are not very LCA-oriented companies. You can look at it as they're more on supply chain oriented and looking from commodity specific. They don't aggregate into many commodities, but check the raw materials and look at the specific issues there. The big companies do that, but for example, Nike is a very LCA-based company. So this is the other things that we produce, those maps and those kind of informations. This is used by the water managers, national policy people. I'm working very closely with European Commission about it, about the climate change adaptation policy. In the morning there was a press conference organized by that, and I talked about actually completely something else, but using this framework analysis is about vulnerabilities of European economy on climate change and weather extremes. What's its relation to water footprint? It is based on water footprint assessment, but in climate change context. There's the calculators. These are just for awareness raising. And this is what about these national dependencies. I briefly talked about this morning. So it's actually, you're dependent on different commodities, and these commodities can disturb by the supply of commodities, by climate change, by droughts, by floods. And there will be high price changes. So actually that's why I'm doing with that's I can mention about it. I'm doing a project with European Commission, give me some euros and then say that we want to know what if soybean supply in Brazil, in Argentina is disturbed by weather extremes. Weather extremes, they mean flood and drought and climate change. And what happens in the meat prices in, what is the famous supermarket here? Name? Tesco. What happens to the meat prices in Tesco, in Czech Republic? So they said, this is never done. Can you do that? I said, of course I can do that, why not? So that's why I try to understand what are the price changes of different commodities if weather extremes and climate change happen somewhere else in the world, not in Europe. So this is about your dependencies because, for example, all meat industry, today I talked about it, 77% of the soybean that is used in this country, in Czech Republic, is coming from outside, somewhere else, mostly from Brazil and Argentina. And why is it so important? You can't have meat. All this soybean is used as feed. So there's a big risk. Actually, your dairy sector, your milk sector, your cheese, or everything you produce their risk is not lies within the Czech Republic. It lies in Brazil because you're dependent in terms of the commodity flows. And these products, soybean, coffee, and cotton, are really vulnerable to climate change and the climate extremes. So we discovered that 57% of the Czech Republic's import is highly vulnerable to water scarcity. This is important because if something happens in Indus River, today it's happening already, the prices will increase here. Who will take the prices? Either the business, they said, oh, okay, I lower my margin of profit, or you will have more prices. If there's a, for example, there's a drought in Turkey in hazelnuts. Hazelnuts is 80% of the hazelnuts grown in Turkey. From where I've grown, I have hazelnuts orchards, actually, a couple of them. And it's used mainly in chocolate industry. And this year, the next year, because there's a big drought there, there's a little production. Next year, either prices of hazelnut chocolates will be really high, or you will find less hazelnut chocolates on the market, because the main producer country has a drought problems this year. So the next year's production will be affected. Either you will pay more, or you will find less. So this is business. So that's the Turkey drought happening in Turkey is affecting the Nestlé's business on chocolate in Switzerland. That's very important, including cacao, coffee, cotton, soybean, rice. You eat rice. I just ate rice for lunch. It's coming from India, probably, or from Pakistan. Sometimes Pakistan, or Thailand, those kinds. So, and they're very climate sensitive areas of the world. So this is about national policy, about climate change, adaptation, trade, bilateral agreements. What we do, for example, about this development policy, national water dependencies, EU is revising its climate adaptation policies, and the new strategy of the EU will embed this kind of information, because this is lack. This is not there, because they never thought about it. When we showed these results within this project, they said, okay, we will embed this new strategy. So what will happen, slowly and slowly, the countries in their new climate change adaptation, in their vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, economical risk assessments, they will embed this kind of information more and more. These are very new ideas and perspectives, so just you may. And the second one, this is about this London I told about you. Then look at this. This is the scarcity changes. This is the pollution changes again per month. And in the red goes to more scarce, gray and dark gray becomes more polluted. So it changes per month. So you can't say just, and they're very connected. So you can see that when the scarcity increases in general, the pollution increases, except this is where the London people live, so there's always a pollution problem. So again, the environmental agency use water footprint assessment framework in a completely different setting, in a setting of building new policies about and regulations on water pollution and water use. It's not about how much water you use in the product. That's where what I mean is that how we understand water footprint assessment is more on water resources perspective, and the LC is just product on level. And this is the new regulation. I'm not going into detail where the environmental agency will use. And this is the South America about water scarcity. And this is used by Swiss Development Agency. Because Switzerland is a country where 90% of its water footprint lies beyond its borders, and mostly coming from these areas. So they thought South America is very important for them, for their consumption and for their economy. What they do, they go to the talk with the farmers, help farmers to improve the productivity. They invest very large amount of money into this kind of productivity increase as a using Swiss Development Agency. There's lots of programs going. So this is, we look at them, we help them to identify the problematic areas, the crops and everything, and how the productivity in agriculture can be increased using water footprint assessment framework. It's a framework, it's a tool. It's not a new concept. It's just a framework tool where you can apply in many settings. Similar, we look at the pollution problems there. PACT is a Bangladesh. I spent almost my 2-3 years in Bangladesh, and it was a great experience. And these are the companies that are working there, and just, I'm sure you know all of them. So you just go and buy. And then what we try to do is just, we try to, in their wet processing, there's wet processing, dyeing industries are there. We try to help the factories and the livelihoods there to improve the water conditions. It's the same concept again. I'm just skipping this. So this is the area where I was talking about the boy that I met. He was living just next to this water. So you can see that textile dry process and VDF is washing, dyeing, finishing. So we look at also geographic perspective, groundwater problems, and look at the groundwater decreases. So it's actually a research type of mind project at the same time. It's not just how much water is used, but you could also look at the sustainability level, what is the groundwater decrease, and what are the resources of it. So you do modeling at the same time. And you cut the future scenarios. Anyways, the CNA, I talked about it. We did lots of studies we had a partnership for 5 years about how much is their supply chain. Cotton, we look at we went to India, we worked with the farmers, we collected data, we understand, this is very interesting, what is the impact of different fertilizers and pesticides they use for the same purpose, because there's the one insect, there's the one some bug there to kill that's reducing the yield, and for killing it, everyone uses a different pesticide. And then we said, okay, what is the most impactful, what is the least impactful in terms of water pollution? So we did a study for 702 farms. We look at the different agriculture practices. What we did is we look at also the organic hybrid approaches. What is the best? Because everyone says, look, this is very interesting. Everyone says organic is the best. Oh, well, let's go for organic. Conventional, yes, we know that conventional is the worst. But actually, from water pollution perspective, in India farms, in 702 farms, we realized that the least pollutant option is not organic, is the hybrid approach. That's very interesting because everyone thinks, let's go organic. Even the companies, CNA said, oh, this is interesting because they always promoted organic. But you know that organic has very low yields. But the hybrid approach, which is semi-organic, somehow, let me say it this way, pollutes, I'm just talking about water perspective. So organic just has other dimensions. And from the water pollution perspective, hybrid approach pollutes less than organic. That's interesting because you look at it from a different, you need to understand these things. But of course you cannot generalize this because this is about certain couple of regions happen in India. 2 minutes. Okay, I'm just skipping this. Farmers are restricted. This is the differences with the hybrid approach. You know what happens? How influential can these studies be? CNA, H&M, all these big companies are now using a hybrid approach in the cotton supply, not fully organic. Because in the world you cannot find much organic cotton. It's very rare. It's not enough to produce all the apparels that we're using. I'm skipping this. This is for Tata in India, another project we did is about their steel factory. So this is a very industrial application of it. So we look at I talked about this. So this is direct, indirect, this is a supply chain approach. So you can see that as a retailer, you have to look at the food processor, farming, and feed crop production to look at the whole supply chain. So this is the whole about water footprint mentality. I think I'm skipping this. These are all examples, country examples. This is another farm in China who is doing this animal meat production. This is water scarcity. This is global groundwater. I'm continuing examples. Today, this is maybe I just briefly mentioned this today's. I added at the end of the today's one. Just says that I said Czech Republic's economy is dependent on water resources outside its borders. Approximately the Czech economy needs 10.8 cubic kilometer water in total, and it's 29 to 30% of it's coming from outside its border, which is in embedded form in terms of its water footprint, external water footprint. And we said that I basically said that this is 77% is dependent on the outside rivers and groundwater, and this is the vulnerability of it. And I think my time is over, and sorry for skipping the last parts of it, but there's so many applications we can present. We can share the presentation with the people. That will be and if you have any questions, please, you're more than welcome now or future. You can use my email. And I hope this word is correct. How do you pronounce this? Spelling? Dikui. Different. Your language is difficult to pronounce. Thank you very much.
We have about about 10 minutes left for questions, 1 or 2 questions. Anyone?
You mentioned putting a price on the pollution in London, but can you describe like the ethics behind, like how do you arrive at a specific dollar amount of like this amount of pollution is worth this much money when it's like something so vital to human existence, like some people would argue almost like human right to clean water.
Mm-hmm.
So like how do you arrive at a number, a dollar amount on that pollution?
Personally, and this is my personal view, I always say I don't like the concept of polluter pays, because it gives you an indication that if you're rich, you can pollute. This is ridiculous. You cannot pollute. You let them to pollute if you say polluter pays. So personally, and I think my colleagues, I can talk also, all my philosophy people like, we are against this kind of things. But how you look at this is that, of course, it's all about how you indicate the monetary volume based on how much effort is needed on ecosystem services to recover it, or what is the damage in terms of how much you can, what's the effort in monetary terms to clean it. First, you can do that. Or the second is how much the ecosystems you're damaging and what is the value of that ecosystem. Ecosystem approach. This is very common here in these days. But that's so difficult to understand and estimate. So it's, in general, when we use such an estimate, we look at what is the investment required to get that pollutant out of the system. That's mostly how we calculate it. But I know that many researchers in these days is just using ecosystem approach. What is the damage given to the ecosystem services that is for the released environment. Okay. When I started this work in 2007-8, those years, the concept was just let's reduce. The higher number is the worst. That's the concept you get. Like if I say 100, if I say 105, and then the concept in volumetric approach is actually the perception you get is bad, but actually not. So what the approach is taking with the companies is more about this. They understand how much is green, how much is blue, and then actually that blue and green in total is needed by the crop. You can't avoid it. If there's no rainfall, you have to irrigate. The blue increases. That crop still needs that amount of water. The crop needs it and uses it. Either you use rainfall. And so what they do is actually try to get the risks, understand the risks, and improve the productivity, and using new systems and everything, rather than just decrease. They want to reduce it, but not just to reduce. They want to understand the risks, and then, for example, they use new type of technologies in terms of increasing efficiency, farmer awareness, and those kind of things. So before that, when I started, they just say, okay, why is there's green? And it's not meaningful for them, doesn't make sense. It makes sense because when you look at most of the product, it's mostly green because it's rainfall, rain fat. Soybean is 99% is rain fat. I mean, wheat is 80 to 90% is rain fat. So what is the significance? Why we calculate it? Because that's the water needed by the crop. Now they understand it. If drought happens, they have to find that water from somewhere else. Or if climate change alters the rainfall patterns, that green water becomes the blue water. When they understand it, they started also reducing that. So the approach has changed within 10 years a lot, because when we started there was lots of reaction. Oh, no, like Seb Miller. If you read that report of the beer, they say green is ignored. There's a net green concept with WWF they did. But now they say differently. The approaches, the understanding is changing a lot. So the approach is no more about what is my risk? How can I reduce this risk? What can I do about it? Shall I work with the farmer? Shall I work with more efficiency, technology? Or if climate change happens, what happens? Do I have to change? Some people told me, like, I want to change my supply chain from this location to that location. Simple is easier rather than finding a solution. So the approach is more about here understanding the total water needed by that crop, and then green and blue concept is more about if it is rainfall enough or not.
More questions?
It was already said in the very beginning that when it comes to LCA, the problem and the greatest criticism is usually about the lack of data and the lack of access to the data. So two LCA studies of the very same product can actually come up with quite different results due to the approximations and due to the various assumptions that you use. So how do you deal with this when calculating the water footprint? Where do you get the data?
There are three types of data that is used. The first one is agricultural one. Agricultural one, all numbers I showed are modeled data. It is almost impossible, it is possible technologically, but so expensive to measure what evapotranspiration or water footprint of a crop produced somewhere else, and wherever it is. It's just an experimental thing. So we use the models. You develop models about semi-empirical models about the crop water use. So, and there is of course an error margin about it because it's just a model. You know, every model has biases, every model has a correction, and then it's an error. So, about the industrial part, many processes in the world, even in Europe, you don't know, they don't measure per process or per item how much water is used or consumed or polluted, because they never give any importance to that. That's true, but there are methods, or like you can use a Simpro type of databases to use for each. They have lots of processes and products, but of course it's for one location or two locations. So here, that's why for us is more important what is significance. If it is significant, for example, in Bangladesh there's no data, nothing, because the water is free, they don't have even meters, anything. You look at the most significant, important parts of it, what we do. So when we have the data problems, we look at you can create data. Like if you're working for a particular factory, you ask them to install water meters in certain processes. Straightforward, like if I work for a particular bottling factory, if my client is that, then I work with them, I say that install water meters there, let's do a measurement. Do testing of the wastewater, let's measure it. And I get the test results, and you can do, I'm talking about a direct footprint. Indirect is a nightmare. And that's very straightforward. You can do it. If not, you have to make an assumption approximation. What my approach is that is always, I tell them, look, these elements in your life cycle, from water perspective, are not relevant, are not significant enough for you to give that effort to get that data. Because like glass, then there's a polyoxide, blah, 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 chemical material. How do I find that? No one gives that information, nobody knows it. You have to go to the secondary sources, and that creates a problem. So it's more about understanding, when you say a number, understand the error margins that you're giving. And it can be significant, but from water side, even in the supply chain, what we do, we look at the 99 threshold. Beyond 99% of the water footprint, we ignore it because it doesn't worth the effort to do it. But if it's more than 1%, we just look at it as water footprint. We do an investigation. If they don't get it, they don't get it. you have to use the secondary information or the measurements. It's rare. Industrial modeling happens, like cooling water. Like, for example, I'm doing a study for Serbia and Romania about water use in their thermal water plants, power plants, sorry. And I have to develop a methodology to estimate it with using the water requirements, not the actual use, because there's no water information. What you do, you said that you know the capacity, you know the cooling tower type, and then what you do is just mechanical, just basic equation of thermodynamics, and then you calculate how much water is required to cool that water. That's an engineering where you calculate it, and then you say that this water is required, but you don't know if they use that much or not. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm afraid we are out of time, so I want to thank Mr. Ercin and Mr. Ansorge for the presentations and talks. I want to thank you for coming here, and I want to remind you, if you leave your email address here in the attendance list, we will send you a presentation and some other materials on water footprint. So thank you again, and good night.
Can I take a picture before you move? Sorry. It's fine. Thank you.